All right, guys, welcome back to We Talk Money. In this week's show, we're talking all things AI, a lot of the opportunities and the exciting stuff that's coming down the pipeline, also some of the controversial stuff and some of the risks to existing markets and a lot of the disruptions that could happen. We could also chat a little bit about Sam Bankman-Madoff's arrest and also the hearing that just happened today, I guess Wednesday, US time. Also inflation data, interest rates, price action, a lot to cover. But Trav, I want to start by asking you, man, what do you think? Is AI going to take everybody's jobs?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is just an AI representation of Travis the Stock Geek. This isn't actually Travis. He's not here. So you wouldn't be able to tell at this point, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, the deep fakes are getting so good. This is one that's been floating around. This is deep fake of Morgan Freeman. And somebody says we're absolutely screwed because, this stuff is just looking so real. And, we've been dealing with impersonators for the past, 7-8 years. And this is about to take it to a whole other level. And then obviously, the big news recently has been ChatGPT, which had reached, 1 million users in like 5 days.
Yep.
Which was like the fastest adoption curve of any tech platform ever. And granted, this is free and, it's really exciting. I want to talk about some of the stuff that I've been doing with it. And I've just gone down the rabbit hole and been thinking deeply about like how this impacts so many different industries, from content creators, artists, researchers, education. Like in my opinion, this right here, what we're looking at on the screen, ChatGPT mixed with some of the copywriting platforms and things like Midjourney, and all the AI art. This changes the game in the most profound way since the advent of search engines. Do you agree with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I totally do. I think, for the first time we see not only like excitement from a mass of consumer users, but also something that really feels like magic to a lot of people in a way that they can understand it, from using like apps like Lensa or ChatGPT to generate things. I mean, there was a guy who wrote a children's book over the weekend using ChatGPT and Midjourney and generated the images. And granted, it wasn't perfect, but this is something that is creating real world applications across a bunch of different verticals immediately. It's just crazy how applicable it kind of reminds me a little bit of like when Apple launched the App Store. You have like 1,000 different ways that people can go build apps or businesses on top of the underlying technology. So that to me is sort of the analogy that I've been thinking about in the last couple of days is like this is like how the App Store enabled 10,000 businesses. The breakthrough in ChatGPT and in generative AI is going to have that and more, in terms of its impact. I think it's pretty wild.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of controversy about, artists are really frustrated with this because they're like, oh, well, in these AI art platforms, they're uploading a style of famous artists, and then people can go in and basically not duplicate their work, but use new prompts to create works inspired by people. So I don't know. We're thinking through the controversial side of it, but I think we should just focus on like, hey, listen, the cat's out of the bag. This is moving forward, and like you can either go with it or you can try to fight it and be angry at it. But I agree with you. I think this is going to be something that's going to offer a lot of opportunity, even if people do get disrupted, right? To me, it's going to just accelerate the rate of change of information, right? Like how much we're getting is already so much, but this is just going to accelerate it to a whole different level.
Totally.
What are some of the examples that you think are going to come out?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we've already started to see like applications emerging in marketing. I know we talked about this somewhat already, but the fact that copywriters can now use products like Copy AI or Jasper or ChatGPT to basically instantaneously come up with 5 to 10 different variations of copy for a product or a service or an idea. And, such a time saver for things like that, creating ads, creating images, or even video. Like when, we know that those video products are already starting to be created, and they'll become scary good, where, there's a question now as to like whether or not entire movies can be made with either totally generated AI actors or AI representations of our already existing actors. Now there's of course like, some copyright issues there, but these are things that could absolutely happen in the short run. Is like now you have a way to produce creative across all these different industries that is done very quickly and at a very high level. And so
Yeah.
that's certainly what I'm thinking of. I've got some ideas on the fashion side that I think are going to be super interesting. Being able to basically see yourself in a bunch of different outfits, or be able to, for people who create fashion products, for instance, like being able to test ideas, without having to make the products, but being able to iterate on tons of ideas, see them on real people, et cetera. So that'll be an interesting one. God, I mean, there's just so many, like we could go on and on, right? I think,
Yeah. Well, I'm
finance.
glad you mentioned the movie one, because I actually just became a movie producer the other
Yeah.
day. I'd like to show you guys what I've been working on. Let me see if I can find the tweet. So this guy at Guy P on Twitter basically showed some of the prompts that he was using, and he says, develop a movie synopsis for a horror film set on an oil rig in this format. And then he put, give me title, tagline, key characters, the protagonist's dark past, the plot synopsis, plot twist, and key locations. And it spit out in a few seconds this idea. And then he went on to create physical descriptions of each character, and then went into, I believe this is Midjourney, or he used Midjourney to create images of the characters. And so I took that same idea and I said, give me an idea of a movie based on crypto traders. And I came up with like 10 different movie names, like Virtual Vendetta, Cyber Showdown, Cryptocurrency Chaos. And the tagline is, when the future of money is at stake, who can you trust? And then came up with, different actors. And then, basically went on to create physical descriptions. And here's the antagonist, looking all scary, and the different key characters. And then you can actually turn these into 3D models, and now you can create videos out of this. And so when you combine, the AI voice acting with the AI art and then the AI text, it's like, wow, yeah, you actually have everything you need to make a movie. Granted, it's still super early in this and it's not going to look amazing, but I think in the next couple of years, like, we're going to be able to create actual feature length movies in maybe a few days.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Hollywood, right? Like, holy crap, man, it's massive.
Totally. I think if at a minimum, I think we know that it is going to change the process for some of the inputs that go into movie making, and hopefully make it more efficient. And, I one of my favorite books of all time is The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. And the book really describes like the history of like, it's sort of like Sapiens Light, in the sense that it kind of discusses the progress of human civilization, and why we've been able to progress, and why we shouldn't fear things like automation or AI. And I don't think he actually called out AI specifically, but he did focus on like automation, and how people for hundreds of years have been worried, what happens when we put farmers out of business because of automation? What happens, when we move to the assembly lines, like we put more workers out of work. But the reality is, over time, humans have adapted and have created new jobs and new skills around, new jobs and industries to be able to fill the gap. And so the hope is that we'll continue to do that. Now, when something like this happens with such an immediate impact, there's going to be a higher potential for displacement for a lot more people. And that's always a concern. Like, if there's not an adjustment period, like there may not be that much of an adjustment period. Like, are half of all copywriters or marketers gonna be put out of business? I mean, I don't know, but I think their jobs are definitely going to change. And I think, movie makers' jobs are going to change. Illustrators and writers, comedians, their job changes in a way where, but it also could make it better. Imagine as a comedian being able to, test all sorts of variations and iterations faster for ideas, even branching off of your own original ideas. So I think, Yeah, it's hard to totally know at this point, but I think like it's going to create a lot of efficiency for some, and maybe it may put some people out of business.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also think, I mean, this is just going to make the internet more interesting at a
Yeah,
minimum. I mean, just
yeah.
look at this beautiful art through Midjourney. I mean, I'm absolutely blown away at the stuff that comes out of this. And
Hmm.
like you said, I mean, there's so many like fast ways to iterate and come up with ideas. Like I just threw in Chat GPT here, said write 10 blog post ideas about stock trading. And these are like legitimate things that like if you were sitting there brainstorming, trying to come up with content, like this really, really helps. Like even if you don't want to rely on it 100% and just copy and paste, like if anything, it can help spark ideas. And I think it's just going to help, I don't know, help create more beautiful things in the world.
Yeah, I mean, as I think about it from the lens of a financial analyst, I saw an example the other day where somebody was saying, write me a report about Nvidia and their recent quarterly results, and it spit out, 5 paragraphs basically summarizing. Now, the funny thing was the numbers were incorrect, so like it was pulling numbers either from random or it was pulling it from like several years ago or something. I'm not exactly sure, but the numbers were wrong, so that's obviously a problem. Like there are definite problems with accuracy in some of these answers. And maybe that gets better over time. But the piece of it that I thought was interesting was that it did create like this rubric, and it could save someone a lot of time if they're summarizing things or writing a report for their investment committee, or if they're a sell side analyst. So like again, I think that's something where it sort of makes that job more efficient, and you get to spend more time on the tasks like actually digging into research, or trying to think about the future or meet with management, rather than the time spent on writing an entire report, because the reality is like that can suck up a lot of time just, putting pen to paper.
Yeah.
So
And then also thinking about like, how does this change education?
yeah.
We went from, look, uh, AI changes the education game so much. Think about it. When we were in high school, what did our teachers used to say like 20 years ago? They were like, hey, listen, you have to learn math equations because you're not going to be able to walk around with a calculator in your pocket. Well,
Yeah.
how fast did we go from, okay, you're not going to be able to walk around with a calculator in your pocket to now you have direct access to true artificial intelligence at any point in time. Like, so the skill set doesn't become, well, I guess it morphs from memorization to the skill set now that's valuable is being able to conceptualize the problem and know how to interact with AI. You don't have to memorize and store everything up here as long as you have access to that. And I guess maybe the argument is like, well, maybe you should still know how to do math outside of that and still know how to do deep research. But I think using AI as a tool is just going to really shorten the learning curve and just make, I don't know, how does this change education?
So I saw a really cool product already being built the other day. Somebody tweeted about it, and basically they had built a Chrome extension that adds a search engine on top of YouTube videos, where you can actually, like, let's say you have a specific question about something, and you could type into the Chrome extension and it would go find the answer at a specific timestamp, across all the universe of YouTube videos, and it would essentially do that work for you of searching through YouTube and find a relevant answer. And so it was using like GPT-3 basically on the back end of that. I'm not exactly totally sure how it works, but I mean, using that as a way to more quickly find relevant answers, I thought was kind of a brilliant use already of that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's on the funny side of things. I think it's going to make it really hard for English teachers and people to who are in the softer, more I guess literary sides of education, because people are going to be able to use this to cheat on their, or to write essays at the very minimum, right? Or even like do book reports and things like that on the click of a button. So you can't really
Hmm.
expect people to write their own original 5-page papers on a book summary now. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that time is better spent in other parts of that subject. I don't know, but it's going to get really
Check this
hard
out.
to not cheat.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was one of the top posts on the Chat GPT subreddit. This is from a teacher. Here she says, I'm having an existential crisis. I'm a high school teacher. I teach computer science, so I'm familiar with tech. I understand what this thing can do. Spent the morning pasting in assignments that I've given in the past. And some of these assignments are from textbooks, others are from that I've created on my own. And the AI produces the solution instantly.
Wow.
So the world is changing. It's going to fundamentally change my job and the job of all teachers that I know. This is also just the beginning. It's going to change the way that humans learn, interact, and analyze. It's very powerful. So people, I think, in the education space are looking at this going, holy shit, this is going to fast track the rate of change so much.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What it ultimately means is still so hard to understand. Like we're going to see it impact everything in such weird ways. Like computer science is an interesting one. It's like, will we be writing code in 10 years? There's already GitHub Copilot, which does a lot of like automation for coders now. I saw somebody like found like a security vulnerability in like a piece of code using ChatGPT, which was like kind of mind blowing to me. So like hackers are going to maybe find 0-day exploits like using this potentially. I don't know for sure, but it seems possible, which is wild.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like
man,
feed, like
there's
if you,
just so many opportunities.
yeah.
This
Oh
is
no, sorry. I
wild.
was just going to continue the thought, which is like
Go
basically,
ahead.
yeah, if you like fed human code into like an AI engine like that, maybe even GitHub Copilot, I know they're already doing this, detecting bugs and things like that. It's pretty wild.
Yep. Definitely, man. Well, I don't know. I think we should explore like over the next several episodes, like maybe different industries, and like anybody listening or watching this, like let us know if you have ideas. Maybe there's a couple startups out there, but
Oh yeah.
man, exciting time to be alive. Let's talk about the markets. So yesterday. So I'm ahead of everybody by 12 hours here in Asia. So
The future.
today, U.S. time, Wednesday, U.S. time, we had the Fed announcement with interest rates. We also had a bunch of fundamental data come out this week. So going back to Tuesday, inflation came out lower, I guess, than expected a little bit. What do you make of the inflation and then the interest rate decision? What can we extrapolate from this?
Yeah. So the November CPI data did come in lower than expected, 7.1. It continues, several months of a downtrend, obviously still very high, 7.1% year over year, but the trend is clear. And I think now when I look at the inflation swaps by late spring of 2023, the market is now expecting inflation CPI to be back under 4%. Yeah, you've got a great graphic up there showing that. And by like late summer, you could be under 3. You could be in the 2s again for inflation. Now, of course, things can happen, like oil prices could spike again, and that could create another bump for inflation. But as it stands now, like the inflation swap market is saying, in less than a year, we're going to be back under 3. That's pretty wild. So, the Fed's policy actions are working to some extent, maybe in weird, perverted ways, like crushing the housing market and, starting to maybe push up on unemployment and, corporate borrowing rates and things like that. But you have to admit, like it is working. Like the problem, at least in the short run, is the problem that markets have been worried about. The number one focus of markets this year is now starting to fade away. And if that continues, then you take a significant worry away. Of course, the new worry you have in markets is recession. So I think that's exactly where the focus is turning in 2023. I think the Fed can keep jawboning about, today there was a Fed meeting. They raised 50 basis points, which was a little bit slower than the last couple of meetings. And they say they're going to keep hiking so that they can get inflation back to 2%. They're committed to it, et cetera. And they can say they're going to keep raising. They can put out their dot plots and show that it's, going to be at 5.5 or higher. I don't think they get many more rate increases, frankly. I think at some point in the 5.5 range, they're done. I think they are. I think the market already knows it. It already sees the future. So the real question will be, has too much damage been done, by springtime of 2023? Like, are we going to be pushed into recession? And that to me is the bigger open question. Yields on government bond yield curve are super, super inverted all the way across the curve. So the bond market is screaming about recession, and equities really are kind of asleep at the wheel. Like they don't really seem to be as worried. So that's a very interesting diversion that we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, it was weird. What was it, 2018, when there was a little bit of an inversion of the yield curve? Like everybody was screaming about it.
Hmm.
And now it's like the inversion is even more pronounced. And you don't really hear many people talking about that as much right now, but it is really interesting how inverted it actually is. Like this is pretty gnarly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the major you can look at the inversion in a lot of different ways, like using different tenors, like different maturities. But I know one of the
Hmm.
biggest ones, one of the more popular ones, is the 10-year versus the 3-month yield. So if you take the 10-year yield, the U.S. Treasury 10-year yield minus the U.S. 3-month yield, that is inverted to the tune of essentially 90 basis points, almost a full percent. So the 10-year
Wow.
is almost a full percent below the 3-month. So the 3-month is
Hmm.
at 4.2 or whatever it's at, and the 10 years over today at 3.49. So the market is saying like rates are going to have to come down in the coming years at some point, and
Hmm.
and that's one of the biggest inversions we've seen in the 10-year 3-month. I think in the last, it's even deeper than the 2000 recession, prior to the 2000 recession, and it's even deeper than what we saw prior to the great financial crisis. In 2007,
Wow.
it got inverted to about 54 basis points, and in 2000 it got inverted to about 80 basis points. We're now like more inverted than both of those. So I think that's pretty
Yeah.
telling.
Yeah. Pretty wild stuff. The inflation narrative has been so pervasive that a lot of people have just like, you know, eh, I guess what was it like 6 or 12 months ago? It was okay. Hey, listen, inflation is transitory. We're going to have high inflation, then it's going to come right back down, and then that was proven not to be true. And now with inflation rolling over, I feel like everybody's in the inflation camp, but we've also got a lot of data supporting disinflation, right? And this was a good thread that I think Nikki threw in about 12 points of different categories that are showing potential for deflation or disinflation, and everything from trucking rates to shipping rates and housing prices, and just a lot of things that are showing pretty aggressive reversals in the inflation narrative. Anything you want to add to this?
No, I mean, we know, especially on the good side, that we're starting to see disinflation. I know used car prices, another area where we're seeing big disinflation. I guess the question
Hmm.
is the services side. It's been relatively hot. Things like travel prices, even rent, which is a lagged figure in the CPI. That's been rising at a high rate. That still isn't coming down yet, but it will because of housing prices. So services, yeah, I mean, healthcare seems to always inflate. And there's a question of like, do we get stuck at like 3 or 4 or 5% inflation because of just services inflation overall remaining sticky? We've talked about things like oil prices. If oil remains in a supply demand deficit, then we could have tailwinds from that structurally for a while. So it's all these puts and takes. It's really hard to figure out. I've been on record saying I think we stay kind of sticky at higher 3-4% year over year rates for a little while.
Hmm.
The inflation swap market is saying we're already going to be below 3 by next year. So I don't know. I think maybe a lot of it will depend on recession because the services side is still really strong, but the good side has definitely come back in. A lot of that's like what the Fed's done, but also like post-COVID changes. So I don't know. It's hard to say
Yeah.
for sure. Like, but I do think like overall, what we can say is that like the trend is very clear and there's nothing that's going to disrupt that downward trend in the near term that we can see today. So like
Right.
this is going to continue trending down for the foreseeable future unless something happens in the energy markets.
And looking at the stock market, it's really interesting how technically we're still in a bear market, right? We are
Mhm.
still making lower lows, lower highs, and we're using both the 100 and the 200 period moving average as resistance. Um, the S&P spiked above, so this was Tuesday, had a really big spike above intraday, above the 200, and then closed way off of its high. And then obviously today, Wednesday, so you guys are probably seeing or watching this or hearing this on Thursday, actually closed back below the 200. So a lot of volatility, kind of a fake out break up above 4,100 resistance. So it's still not crystal clear if we're going to get a pop stop run and squeeze shorts, and even Bitcoin, obviously, which has been following the Nasdaq for quite a while now, is also still very much technically in a bear trend, right? We broke down through 18K in early November, and then yesterday pulled back, tagged the 100 period moving average and 18K as resistance, which is also a Fibonacci retracement of about 50% from the last pivot high. So, there's really no strength in price action that I can see yet. We are at a pivotal level. So if we squeeze through this level, yeah, we could pop shorts pretty quickly. But I don't know, man. The price action is just not looking quite strong right now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally concur. I do think on the stock side, as I think about, heading into the end of the year, there aren't a lot of obvious negative catalysts. Like we don't get earnings yet until, I mean, we could get some pre-announcements. That's just not going to happen before January 1st. We might get some more in January, but there's not an earnings season to speak of. There are no more Fed meetings. There's no more CPI readings like through the end of the year. We did have that pop after the CPI came in lower. So I think there's a possibility that the S&P at least could be back above that 200-day, that it could make a run, at least like a Santa Claus rally, as they call it. I think there's a reasonable chance that happens, and it surprises a lot of people, even people like myself who are still relatively defensive. We know hedge funds are positioned really defensively. So, hard to make a call, but I see the conditions existing in the S&P for a relatively solid finish to the end of the year. But, I still think looming in 2023 are going to be these fears of recession. What happens to corporate earnings? I still think the tech sector in particular, like we're going to have earnings adjustments downwards for at least Q4 and maybe Q1. So that I think, I got a cramp.
You must have been working out too hard.
Oh man, played too much pickleball today. Sorry
Nice.
about that. But yeah, that's something I've been thinking about on the stock side is like, do I need to be positioned to have like a little bit more risk on in the portfolio? And I'm too scared to do it, but I can see the case for it at least.
Well, I know you've been making some plays. Let's talk about RONI, the warrants. And I wanted to ask you about this because not a lot of people trade warrants, and this was this week a pretty big winner for you. Like, what happened to this as an example? Maybe kind of talk about what warrants are and how people can use them, and why right now you've been kind of looking at these as opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the SPAC warrant. So Roni basically is a SPAC. It's the second SPAC from a team run by the Rice brothers, a family and a team basically in Texas here that's done a lot of interesting things in the energy world and have had a number of different successes, public companies that have been sold. And so they have just a phenomenal track record. And their first SPAC was acquired a company called Archaea Energy, and it was public for a while. And it was one of the bigger success stories in the SPAC world. And that company actually just got acquired. I believe it was BP or somebody like that acquired it for $4 or $5 billion recently. So the stock did phenomenally well. The warrants did phenomenally well. And by the way, just quickly, warrants are basically like an option. They're almost like a call option on the underlying de-SPAC company. When the SPAC finishes its transaction and takes its company public, the warrants are like a call option, a 5-year call option on that company's stock. Now, in good times, like in 2021, everyone loved these SPAC warrants. They loved them even before the SPACs made a deal because they had the potential to be really valuable call options if a SPAC did a really good deal. And then the SPACs that actually did a deal, a lot of these warrants went up a ton because the de-SPAC prices went bananas. So that was 2021. Now in 2022, everyone hates SPACs. There's been a lot of crappy companies that have performed terribly in SPAC world. So not only have the warrants of the existing de-SPAC companies just gone to shit, but basically any SPACs that are out there looking for deals, their warrants have gone to like less than 10 cents in many cases. And I'd done a bunch of work, put together a Monte Carlo simulation in Python, basically looking at what these warrant prices should trade at if a SPAC does a deal and it just trades at that $10 initial SPAC price. And it's basically like these things should be somewhere between $2 and $3 if the SPAC stock is at 10. Even at a $5 stock price, these things should be worth like $1. But a lot of these things have been trading, like I said, at like 10 cents or below. And even the de-SPAC companies, a lot of these things are just washed out. So I looked at something like, the Rice Brothers' second SPAC, Roni, and it was still looking for a deal. I knew they would close a deal because we know that, they have the track record. They're focused on a sector that's been doing well, energy and alternative energy. And their first SPAC was a home run. They made a ton of money for their investors. So I knew that there would be a deal. It was just a question of when and how good. And so I started buying these warrants at like 65 cents. Again, remember, I think their first SPAC, their warrants were actually taken out at like $6 or $7. So I was buying these at 65 cents, thinking that there was a potential multi-bagger at 65 cents. These things traded against me for the better part of a year, traded down to around 25 cents, 20 to 25 cents at the low. So I was able to get my average cost down to about 45, 50 cents or so. And then just this morning, of course, they announced their deal, and the warrants popped about 220%. So they're into the day around 80 cents. I still think there's some upside potentially here. But yeah, I mean, I think the bigger story here is, one, SPAC warrants are incredibly washed out. Some of them are zeros, and some of them are going to be crazy good multi-baggers. So it's an interesting place to hunt. I think the amount of SPACs doing good deals has basically gone to like less than 10%. So it's low probability, but extremely, extremely high upside if you can identify a couple of these that have a very high probability of doing something smart. So that's my speech. My SPAC warrant portfolio overall, I think, is down. I've had a couple of really big winners, and then I've had some zeros and some TBDs, but it hasn't worked out like I initially hoped as far as the entire warrant portfolio. But Roni, those warrants were my biggest SPAC warrant position, so it was nice to get a win, baby.
It always feels good, right? Like there's market environments that are just really dry, and you feel like you're grinding it out, and you might take like several strikes, and then you get like one home run or a triple, and it's like, okay, we're still here, we're still in the game, right? And then you have those outlier years where it's like just everything works, right? And everything that you touch turns to gold. And I think, the lesson is just like, don't do anything that's going to take you out of the game permanently. Diversify, use position sizing. And then now, from here on out, all we have to do is use ChatGPT to tell us what to buy and sell.
Yes.
So,
ask ChatGPT which SPACs are going to do good deals and which warrants I need to buy.
Yeah. So while Travis was talking, for you guys that are on the podcast, you can't see what I was doing, but I just typed in, I said, what are stock warrants? And it gave me a 1-paragraph description of what stock warrants are. And then I said, are stock warrants good investments? And GPT says, it's difficult to say whether they're good investments without knowing the specific warrants in question and the overall market conditions. That's true. In general, however, stock warrants can be a good way for investors to gain exposure to a company's stock at a potentially lower price than the current market price. This can be especially attractive if the investor believes the stock is likely to increase in value over time. However, there are also risks associated, blah, blah, blah. For example, if the stock doesn't rise, the warrant may expire without being exercised, and the investor could lose the money that they paid for the warrant. So, again, this isn't like mind-boggling information, but it's good basic knowledge, right?
It's dead on.
A great start.
Yeah, and it's dead on. It's interesting because I have thought of you this year with regard to the stock warrant play, like the portfolio of stock warrants that I was getting into, because you have always said that it's really important to think about the market environment you're in. And I also know that, and I've even said that in my stock investing course, but I didn't really follow our own advice on this because I knew things were getting more difficult for SPACs to get transactions done this year. And I sort of convinced myself, I was like, well, that's fine. There's 600 SPACs out there. 400 of them can go away, but 200 of them will get deals. And if I just pick the right ones, it'll be great. But the reality is, like, I could have saved myself a lot of pain just by waiting or by not getting involved at all just because of the market environment. Like these things still went to prices that I just didn't expect them to go to in aggregate. So I think like it really speaks to like the wisdom that you've given time and time again, which is understand the market cycle you're in and what that means for the kind of trades you take. Like when it's popcorn season, take these trades, find all these potential warrants that can pop off. When it's a bear market, maybe you don't take levered call option or warrant trades. It's like things like that.
Yeah.
So
Well, I appreciate that. And that's one thing that we've heard time and time again from, some of the oldest, uh, investing and trading books to, it's like timeless wisdom, like the idea of letting the market dictate what trades you should take, right? It's like when you see free money, pick it up. Everything else kind of pass on. And I look at myself as like a retired trader, right? Not that I don't trade, it's just I don't try to force opportunities. I just want to take trades that I'm like, my conviction level is really, really high. And if you start with a top down approach by first looking at market conditions and saying, like, hey, are things ripe, right? Or are things completely dry? Or are we in planting season, right? Are we in the depths of a bear market where you want to plant seeds that you can harvest during a bull market, right? So, and I think if people start with that as their the step one of their mental framework, it just eliminates so much of kind of what you talked about, which is like chasing opportunities or maybe manufacturing opportunities when they're really not there. And it's good that you'll like publicly admit that, right? Like we still make mistakes, even if we know better. It's like we still can go against what we believe in. And that's why I think trading and investing is so amazing because you have to be honest with yourself. And if you're not, you're going to get into trouble.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Okay. So I think we need to discuss, even though this has been beat to death this week, Sam Bankman Madoff getting arrested and what that means for crypto
Oh no.
and the whole, the hearing that happened today and the Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act and what that means for crypto and the fallout and the contagion from FTX. Look, I think it's a great thing that SBF is being held accountable. I wish it didn't have to happen. I mean, this is probably one of, if not the largest frauds in all of history. I don't know. Was Madoff bigger than this?
I don't believe so. And I think the recoveries on a lot of those Madoff claims actually ended up being pretty good. And I think
Mm,
FTX is going to be much worse. So I think the ultimate loss will be much, much larger on FTX in the end. I believe that's current, or I believe that's correct. But
yeah.
yeah,
Man, that to me, that was one of the saddest things to happen in crypto ever because it hurt so many people, right? On so many different levels, right? From just millions of individual small investors to celebrities and teachers' pensions funds and hedge funds. I mean, the fallout from this is so bad. And so I hope that he does get held accountable. I wish it didn't happen, but it did. And that's where we are. And I mean, I've seen some people breaking down like potential jail time, and I mean, he could spend the rest of his life in prison, man. This is bad.
yeah, yeah. And I think I've listened to Lex Friedman's interview with CoffeeZilla, which was really interesting. CoffeeZilla, somebody who exposes a lot of financial schemes and frauds on YouTube and other channels, and he's really good. I like a lot of what he had to say, but especially on the interview with Lex, he talked about the SBF stuff because he had an opportunity to interview SBF, I think, a couple times on Twitter Spaces. And, essentially like CoffeeZilla said a few things that really resonated, which was like, SBF has gone around doing the media circus and basically putting up this front that somehow it was all just innocent mistakes. And that,
Mm-hmm.
like if we had just done this, we could have recovered everyone's money and blah, blah, blah. But CoffeeZilla like breaks down in several different ways why that's BS and why like it was very clear fraud and that like it was intentional fraud and like it couldn't be anything but intentional fraud given like the patterns of things that happened and also like the sophistication of even SBF, who he is, where he went to school, MIT, who his parents were, how he was raised and
Yeah.
working at Jane Street and all these other things. It's like, you're not just an idiot who makes mistakes in Excel. Like, you had 30 corporate entities, you don't just create this crazy web of corporate entities as an accident, like oops, like oh we forgot this stub account. No, like you had 30 entities set up in various countries across the world. Like this was intentional. So
And then it
Yeah.
came out that they were using fucking QuickBooks to run all their financials through. And this is one of the biggest problems that I've seen in the past like 3 or 4 years in crypto, is just people playing fast and loose, right? And the growth has just been so tremendous. And that's where, you get these big ego players like Do Kwon with Luna and SBF and, BlockFi. I mean, maybe BlockFi is not in that same category of like a cult leader and Hex and stuff like that. It's just like this stuff is now imploding because of the hubris and just the lack of responsibility that people have exercised. And it just sucks because it's like it's a scarlet letter on the crypto space. I thought 2017 people were going to wake up to this and like the fraud was done, but the frauds just keep getting bigger and bigger. I think this is the one that breaks the camel's back. And unfortunately, it gives politicians the power that they need, or the I don't know, I guess just the justification to try to put stuff like this in a anti-money laundering act out there. And, hopefully the fallout from this doesn't result in legislation that is crippling to Bitcoin and crypto in the US. But I don't see how this doesn't happen, right? Like, will this one get passed specifically? I don't know. But is there more regulation coming? Are all the 3 and 4 letter agencies about to get way more aggressive? I think so. And I'm just like, man, when's the bullshit going to stop? Are we going to continue to see implosions like this and scams and these ego players that just blow up and end up spending the rest of their lives or decades in prison? Like, can we just stop and just focus on real development? Like, I'm frustrated, man. I'm frustrated with it.
Yeah, I can understand that sentiment for sure. I think there will be another cycle, and like it seems like every major cycle in crypto has gone through this pattern, including the regulation side, where like there's more regulation, like there's more wake up at the regulatory level. But this one might be the one where we get the heaviest backlash from the regulatory side, and maybe even also like some of the hardest, deepest losses for like the most amount of people.
Yeah.
But from that,
yeah,
I think
this makes Mount Gox look like a little like rounding error. Like this is nuts, man.
yeah.
So I don't know. Kudos to everybody who like calls out scams, and like I think we as a community need to really focus on doing that early and not letting greed and these market cycles run away with everybody's money, because that's what happens, right? Like people get greedy, they see price going up, they buy the high, they panic sell the low, they yeet into really risky yield farming bullshit that implodes and they lose everything. I don't know. Let's just stop doing that. But I agree with you too. Like I'm optimistic. I think the next wave of crypto is going to be fewer projects that are higher quality. At least that's my hope. And, a couple of years ago, we were really stoked about security tokens. And I think that is still a very viable option where you tokenize assets. We just have to tokenize the right assets, legitimate assets.
True.
So, all right, cool. So we talked about inflation, deflation, interest rates, AI, crypto's arrest. We've talked about price action. What else you want to cover, Trav?
Well,
what else is happening out there?
The big dog in the room in the stock world. RIP to the Tesla bulls. They have been slaughtered.
Oh
no. It came out after hours today. Another Form 4 filing. Elon Musk selling, I think, another like 20 million shares. I have to look up the exact number. 22 maybe. Significant amount of stock. Maybe he's a forced seller even at this point. He's either selling because he's worried about continuing to fund more of the Twitter buyout, or he's selling because he's forced to sell due to a margin call. There are a lot of people, potentially Elon included, who can get margin called on Tesla stock because, people have kind of to our earlier conversation where people in a bull market and people in the Tesla bull market the last 10 years learn to buy every dip, learn to margin up their portfolio, yellowing in Tesla. And that was
Yep.
working for a long time. And now it's not working. The opposite is happening. And I think they're learning the lesson of the danger of margin. I saw a guy the other day on Twitter who I think built a lot of his YouTube persona around Twitter stock. He said he was going to mortgage his house. Like he's going to sell his house. He's now going to sell his house and start renting so that he can take that capital to invest it in Tesla at these prices. I'm like, man, believe what you want about a stock. Like I've thought at various times, through the last 2 decades, that certain stocks were just absurdly cheap and just like there was no downside. But I never got to the point where I was like all in everything, like selling my other assets and other asset classes to like go all in. Like that seems just crazy.
Yeah, that's what happens when you become a tribe member, right?
Yeah.
Or a cult member of one of these things. We see it in crypto, we see it in stocks, but when you tie your identity to a fucking company or a ticker or a project, and you give yourself a name, some stupid name that associates with that, it's like that literally is cult-like behavior, and that's where you end up getting blown out.
Yeah.
The market punishes that behavior.
Indeed. It's like we've seen it time and time and time again. Crypto, stocks, any other asset class. It's just, it's a story as old as time. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, look though. So looking at the TA on Tesla, going back to your point, the buy the dip bull trend lasted for about 2 years, right? Started in 2020 with the stimulus from Uncle Sam and peaked out here in late 21. And so it's been in a bear market for about a year. It's now about 65% off all-time highs, and it's sitting at the 200 period moving average on the weekly chart. So I don't know, technically, I guess this could be a good dip by area, but fundamentally, what do you think of the company? And like, I don't know if you've done recent deep work on this or not. Like, are you optimistic on the future, or is this something where you think we could get a death spiral with margin calls and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'd be worried about the margin call spiral. We also, Tesla, it's not, while Tesla investors think that it's trading at a cheap price because it's trading at, one of its cheapest price to earnings multiples that it's traded at, it's overall at an absolute level, not at a cheap price yet. And especially when you compare it to like a lot of the automaker peers, which consistently trade at like super low multiples, like 5 times earnings, 10 times earnings at the most. Tesla's still trading for like 30 times next year's expected earnings. I've also seen some data out there suggesting that the deposit numbers for Tesla continue to weaken, at least in the US. So you got some fundamental concerns like, are the earnings estimates even right for next year? Like, are they really going to grow earnings at 30 to 35% next year? So there's a lot of fundamental questions that would concern me still. Like even at today's prices, it doesn't look like a screaming cheap buy if you believe like fundamentals are deteriorating. The CEO is obviously distracted by another company at the current time. You may have some regulatory intervention around the whole autopilot stuff at some point. It's not a great story overall from a fundamental perspective. Now, that being said, the thing that you could still point to is that, Tesla's faced a lot of challenges. It's faced, competition in the past, and the reality is like they tend to overcome them, or they have in their history. If they can grow at 25, 30% a year still next year, then, that deserves a multiple premium. And a growth company that can do that, an automaker company that has more revenues from things like software than probably the other automakers, it deserves a higher multiple. So you could make the case. I would rather make that case if it was trading for, say, 15 or 20 times next year's estimated earnings. At 30 times, I'm still not there yet. But
But Trav, it's a tech company, not a car company.
Exactly, right? Yeah, you got to believe a lot about the future there. And oh man, the cramp is back.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you're seeing in real time,
that's
too much
the sign.
pickleball is detrimental to your muscle fatigue.
That's the sign right there. I talked bad about Papa Elon, and now it's now it's
they're
on.
coming for you. You must not have stretched enough.
Nope, I didn't. I came from 3.5 hours of pickleball and sat in this chair.
Oh my God.
Sorry about that.
Well, that's another lesson in and of itself. As our friend Garrett would say, you got to stretch, man. If you don't stretch, this is where your hip flexors get tight. And yeah, I've been traveling a lot through Asia, and like I can notice if I go one day without stretching out my hip flexors and like my quads and stuff, I'm just a wreck. So maybe that's a function of just getting older.
Oh yeah, you got to take care of your body more and more, especially as you get older. That's what we're learning here.
Yep. Cool, man. Well, yeah, just to recap, buy the Tesla dip, don't mortgage your house, sell your house, take that equity, put it directly into Tesla stock. And also, yeah, give yourself I don't know. Let's ask let's ask the chat AI.
Ask what they think
What
of.
stock cult should we join? Let's see if this will give us anything. I'm sorry, but oh yeah, a lot of people have been complaining about this. Like they're getting a lot of I'm sorry's, but I'm not programmed to recommend certain things. So good job, AI. You're not going to get yourself into financial trouble there.
They won't get busted by the SEC like those other pump and dump traders this week.
Oh yeah, there was a big case. I don't think I have a link to it, but yeah,
big bust.
The SEC is now coming after pump and dumpers hard, which they should. I mean, look, there's been a lot of manipulation, not just in crypto, but I think these guys were primarily stock guys. Yeah.
Yep. They were stock guys, really popular ones on Twitter, a couple 100,000 followers each. And I'd had last year there was a stock that I'd put out some fundamental work on right before their earnings report. These guys were pumping it, and I was like, yeah, no, the alternative data on this looks really bad, and I think they're going to whiff their earnings. And sure enough, they did. And that stock's down 90% since that earnings report.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Crazy. Well, a little bit of a quicker class today or episode today. Trav, thanks for joining me, man. What are you looking forward to, I guess, over the next week as we're going into the Christmas season? We've got Christmas not this weekend, but next weekend. And we've got New Year's the weekend after that. Any kind of end of year things that you're looking forward to or that you think could pop before then? I know you mentioned the Santa Claus rally potential.
Yeah, I definitely see the potential there. Markets will get pretty slow as we get into like the Christmas week. And so that's always a little boring, but excited to spend that time with family. I'm also excited, every year do a goal setting exercise. And so, I'll be looking forward to that and really thinking about like what I want 2023 to look like. So big goals for 2023. And that's really it. How about you?
Nice, man. Same. I mean, we're just traveling. We're going to be on the beach here in a few days. And I don't know. Let's see what the chat bot has to say for us. I said, give me an end of year goal setting exercise. Here is a simple end of year goal setting exercise you can try. Number one, start by thinking about what you want to accomplish in the coming year. This could be related to your personal life, career, finances, health, relationships, or any other areas that are important to you. Number two, once you've identified your goals, write them down in a list, be specific. Number three, think about the steps you'll need to take to achieve each goal. Break down each goal into smaller, more manageable tasks. Number four, once you have a plan, review your goals regularly and track your progress. I mean, this is amazing. One simple little prompt gave us all of this, right? And you could tell it to expand on certain things. You could have it create flows for you. Like, I don't know. I'm just so excited. I've been spending way too much time in the AI art and chat bots and copywriting bots lately. But I think it's time well spent because this is the biggest thing that I see since Google, right? Since search engines. It's kind of like the next level to that.
Yeah, it's a game changer. I agree. So yeah, if you're building businesses around some of these ideas, reach out to us. Like I'd be curious to know what people are building, to give feedback and just to see the cool stuff, just to use it, become a user.
So we're going to put AI on the blockchain and create a shitcoin and then pump it. There we go.
There we go.
All right. On that note, we can go ahead and wrap it up. Guys, thanks for watching or listening. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have a new YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/WeTalkMoney. Go to WeTalkMoney.com, submit a question for the show. Have a great Christmas holiday or whatever you celebrate, and go find an AI to help you set goals for 2023.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. All right, Trav, we'll talk to you soon, man. Thanks, guys.
Sounds good, brother. Cheers.